Oh, hi there, friends. Mandy here. Restorative grief is all about creating easy access to healing no matter where or who you are. That's why I want you to remember that if you want grief support beyond a podcast, my 31-day guidebook is available to order on Amazon. Embracing our losses without losing ourselves is a reflective journey into the holistic needs of grievers and learning to support yourself, mind, heart, body, and spirit. Don't just wing it. You can lean into grief work with a guide. The link for the book and more are available in the show notes, and as always, you can reach out with questions. But for now, let's get on to this week's episode. Welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. You are listening to episode 186, titled Grieving Together, Healing in the Wake of Abusive Communities. I want to start this week's conversation with a gentle reminder that if you are feeling reactivated in your body at the idea of this conversation, it's okay to pause and orient yourself in safety. Use this as practice ground for facing down any triggers in your own life that disallow your whole self to remain in the present moment. When we face the stories of abusive communities, present day or in our past, we are grieving on a collective level that cannot be addressed until we learn to grieve as individuals too. So this week, I'm speaking to both parts, the individual impacted in an abusive community and the community around them, seeking to minimize harm and cultivate space for healing. To all the dysregulated nervous systems, to the humans afraid to speak, to the quietest mice hiding in the corners of every room, to the bodies traumatized by manipulation, to the hearts considering hardness for the sake of self-preservation, and to the spirits dampened by unholy rains, I say, you do not grieve alone. You will not grieve alone. You will be heard, noticed, and honored with compassion for your softness. Grief is messy, but it is our avoidance of grieving that makes it messier. Time and again, we see a familiar pattern in communities, spiritual or otherwise, where harm goes unnoticed or unchallenged for too long. These are spaces meant to uplift, support, or guide people toward healing, yet they fall short, failing to hold themselves to the very standards they claim to uphold. As a trauma professional and someone who cares deeply about creating safe spaces for healing, I want to offer a balm for the soul and provide some direction for those of us navigating grief and harm within these spaces. Many times, people in positions of power within a community can act with impunity, their actions left unchecked. Their charisma or influence often goes unquestioned, while the voices of those harmed by their actions are dismissed or silenced. These systems create a toxic environment where accountability is evaded, and those who attempt to raise concerns are often labeled as overreactive, divisive, or disloyal. This pattern is not new. It's as old as human nature, and it thrives in any environment where the balance of power is skewed and unchecked. The hard truth is this: these harmful dynamics are often invisible until they are impossible to ignore. Maybe we admire this person and can't tolerate a dual understanding that they might cause harm. Perhaps there's a huge power dynamic in place where we lack access to speak up and reflect harmful behaviors back to the persons in question. This is why our bodies are so critical in recognizing these dynamics. Our nervous systems are wired to protect us in moments of perceived threat. The familiar fight or flight response is just the beginning. There are also responses where we freeze, flop, or fawn. Our brain recognizes patterns and activates a response, even if our cognitive awareness is cloudy or our emotional state is too raw. These dynamics are sustained by a culture of silence and fear, and that culture feeds off our collective reluctance to name and challenge the ways power is abused. The challenge for all of us, then, is to recognize these systems when they are in play and take action before the harm deepens. I'm not the only person talking about this, certainly, but from a restorative grief perspective, I want you to know how to recognize harmful systems and power dynamics so that if you find yourself in a situation similar to one of these, you can address it and protect your own nervous system first. So the first step in addressing any abusive system is learning to identify the warning signs. Here are some common indicators you might see. A lack of accountability. Leaders or figures in authority are rarely questioned, and when they are, defenses are quickly raised. If accountability mechanisms are weak or non-existent, this is a red flag. There may be dual relationships or ethical gray areas. For example, when professional and personal roles blur, power dynamics become even more complicated. Like someone acting as both a spiritual guide and a close friend may hold undue influence over others, making it difficult for people to challenge them. The next is minimizing or dismissing of harm. When claims of harm are raised, whether it's emotional, spiritual, or psychological, the response from the community or leadership would be to downplay it, reframe it as a misunderstanding, or label those speaking up as overly sensitive. Maybe there's a fear of speaking out. If there is noticeable tension when people try to address concerns, or if individuals express fear of being ostracized for bringing up issues, it's a clear sign that a power imbalance is at play. People should feel safe to express their discomfort without fear of reprisal. And another one is emotional manipulation. When a leader expresses guilt or cries in response to accusations, it can subtly shift the narrative, making those who raise concerns feel as though they are hurting the person in power, thereby silencing further critique. We don't push back to cause harm, but because of that lack of wanting to cause harm, we might remain silent, thinking our harm is less important. When you see these dynamics in play, it's crucial to ask, is this community, system, or leader fostering genuine connection or healing, or are they exploiting their power to maintain control? If it's the latter, it is time to speak up or lend your support to those who are. Exploitation isn't blatant. It's subtle and easy to write off as a character quirk or as the status quo. And that's what lets it remain intact, unchallenged. So supporting those in your life who have been harmed within an abusive system requires empathy, courage, and active engagement. Here are 5 ways that you can make a meaningful difference. And if you are the person experiencing harm and needing support, look for people who can offer one of these 5 or more areas of support for you. Number 1, listen without judgment. Often people in abusive systems fear speaking out because they are unsure of how they'll be received. And if someone shares their experience of harm with you, listen with compassion. Don't rush to conclusions or defend the accused. No playing devil's advocate here, okay? Especially before fully understanding the depth of their harm. Validation can be a powerful first step toward healing. And even if you mean well, playing the devil's advocate to help them see both sides is absolutely an inappropriate response when you first learn of someone's harm. Number 2, amplify their voices. For those who've been harmed, it can feel like shouting into a void when no one is willing to acknowledge their experience. Be a voice that stands with them. Whether it's speaking up in meetings, supporting them on social media, or privately reassuring them that they are not alone, your validation helps break the cycle of silence. Third, challenge the harmful narratives. In abusive systems, there's often a push to dismiss or minimize the harm, to label it as an overreaction. Challenge this narrative, especially when you see it play out in public spaces. You have a right to ask others to consider whether they are perpetuating a harmful culture by invalidating the experiences of those who have expressed hurt. Number 4 is encourage accountability. Communities thrive when they hold their leaders to the same standards as everyone else. Advocate for transparency and clear paths to accountability. And if leaders are unwilling to be held accountable, it may be time to reconsider the safety and integrity of the space. Humility should be evident, but if it is absent or feels suspect, it is reasonable to trust your instincts and back away. And finally, number 5 is offer practical support. Sometimes those who have been harmed need tangible support, help navigating their options, access to mental health resources, or even just a listening ear. Offer what you can and direct them to professionals who can provide further assistance if needed. This is why grief work is essential, because grief is never limited to death. But when we talk about communities being torn apart by abusive dynamics, it can feel like a death anyway. Trust is lost. Safety is shattered. The vision of what the community once represented is no longer possible, and so we grieve. But we cannot grieve communally if we refuse to grieve as individuals. When we avoid our personal grief, it spills over into our interactions with others, leading to blame, infighting, and a lack of a meaningful resolution. Avoidance allows the system to stay in place while the wounds continue to fester. Grief work starts with acknowledging the harm and the loss on an individual level. Only then can we begin to collectively heal. Communities that avoid grief are also avoiding accountability. They rush into repair without understanding the depth of harm done, which leads to more hurt down the road. And when a system or a leader lacks the humility to face their role in the harm, the opportunity for healing vanishes. But grief work, when done properly, invites us to look inward, reflect, and transform. It asks us to slow down and tend to our wounds, to the pain and trauma inflicted, maybe that we've caused, and to the loss of what we once believed our community stood for. Only by engaging in this work, individually and collectively, can we dismantle the harmful systems that allow abuse to thrive. As we grieve and reflect, we must learn to hold space for each other's pain, to fight for accountability, and commit to breaking down systems that allowed harm to grow in the first place. Healing is possible, but only if we do this work individually and together. We must support those who have been harmed. We must challenge the systems that perpetuate the harm, and we must work together to create spaces where safety, compassion, and integrity are prioritized. Moving forward to dismantle power dynamics and systems of support for them include relinquishing the need to be platformed and celebrated as individuals or leaders. When we continually allow the same voices and tones to speak from a microphone, we are listening to the same narratives. The way forward cannot be found without including or deferring to the groups traditionally marginalized and kept from the platforms. If you are in a position of leadership or influence, invite conversation around what leads to unhealthy dynamics and abuse of power. Go inward with others holding you accountable. Evangelicalism, as an example, went so wrong with accountability groups that focused on outward behaviors. It is the state of our inner worlds that leads us to ego-driven self-preservation and harm at the cost of our love for others. As we grieve individually, we can learn to extend care outward. This is where we can begin to support those grieving, advocate for transparency, and question the systems that allowed the harm to thrive. By grieving honestly and collectively, we can create something new, rooted in compassion, transparency, and true accountability, which is the whole reason we started a new, healthier version of community in the first place. Thank you for listening to episode 186 of Restorative Grief. This conversation is always ongoing. Communities will continue to harbor and protect abusive personalities and, in some cases, even attract the type of people who thrive in the power dynamics we identified as harmful. That does not mean we bite our tongues or keep to the shadows. It means that we light our candles one at a time to honor each individual survivor who speaks truth to power and to identify that not everyone makes it out or has safety enough to share. Each candle gathered together has the strength and the energy to expose each dark corner where hope is needed the most. If this is your first time listening to the podcast and you are someone struggling with the idea of healing from an abusive community, I will include a few resources in the show notes around the work from within a spiritual community as well as non-spiritual communities. If you're struggling with your own individual healing work or have a community that could use some extra support, please feel free to reach out for additional resources or to discuss what might be possible as a collaboration with Restorative Grief. I want to thank my patrons for their support of this show. You too can become a podcast supporter by visiting patreon.com/Mandy Capehart. And I also want to identify some of the beautiful souls who helped me through my own experiences of spiritual abuse and communal healing. You know who you are, so I won't name you here, but you also know that I could not do any of this without you. And as always, before we go, one last thing. Please remember, the only solution for grief is to do the work of grieving. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week.